Ma'am, you are live, ma'am. We can start.
So should I start with a
Yes, ma'am.
question that I have already received?
Right, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Start with it, ma'am.
Fine,
Right,
fine,
ma'am.
I'll do that.
Yes, ma'am.
Hello, everyone. I've just received one question in the last week, I think. I've just
You are
got
live,
it.
ma'am. We can start.
Yeah. So should I start with a
Yes, ma'am.
question that I have already received?
Right, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Start with it, ma'am.
Yeah,
Right,
fine,
ma'am.
I'll do that.
Yes, ma'am.
So, hello, everyone. I've just received one question in the last week. Just 1 minute. I need to mute the. Yeah, yeah. This one. Just 1 minute.
Right, ma'am. Yes. Start with it.
Yeah. I just muted the volume. Uh, so the question was like, is there a way to deliberately control the time that the viewer take to experience the image? If so, how do we go about it? Does tempo of a visual image have anything to do with this? If not, what is tempo of a visual image? That's a crucial question, but I need to answer it in 2, 3 different parts. Um, are you there, like Nitin Radhakrishnan? But even if you're not there, I think the answer is meant for everybody. Now, when we talk about tempo, what we mean is the pace, speed that is related to movement, and movement is related to visual rhythm. Now, visual rhythm is operated by movement. And when we talk about movement in a static visual image, which is a painting or maybe any kind of interface that is otherwise static, now we talk about the interactivity between the viewer and the visual. And of course, the person who made it, the artist, the designer, they are the one uh, who decide on how the tempo would be. Now, when we talk about tempo, we usually discuss like tempo is a very important term when it comes to film. That's also a visual medium, but unlike painting, it's not a static medium. It has a kind of a tangible movement, where in painting, it's more like an anticipatory movement that we see. So in a film, there are three kinds of tempo that we see, which is related to the real time or the actual speed, how it's happening. Like, I'm coming from my room, I'm going to my office, sitting there. Uh, in film, we do not see each and every steps there. We skip on a few frames. Similarly, for motion pictures or in animation, also like a static medium called when you see the graphic novels, the cartoons, and kind of graphic stories, we skip a few frames there just to show. Just to make the real time more precise, and we just show how much is needed, because most of the things there are, again, like it's anticipatory. You go by anticipation. So that's the like actual speed that we consider. And then we have another element to enhance that tempo or the movement. That is the accompanying music. We use music in the background or sound in general. Uh, I called it music because we try to use a rhythmic sound in any kind of sound effect, preferably a music, to build up the tempo in a film. Again, I'm talking about the motion pictures. And then also the content of the story, the script, that plays a very important role to build up that tempo in the visual medium. Now, when it comes to visual art, if we take example of Bruegel's paintings, they're like, there are, to give you some of the references, you should see some of the Bruegel's narrative paintings. I'm like, it's not narrative painting, but the painting is full of narrations. And as we say that it takes us a lot of time to watch that, because he has worked on details. Like there are lots of events happening, there are multiple people and characters, they're moving all over, all around. So when we see Peter Bruegel's paintings, a few examples that you can see is maybe the Fall of Icarus or the Triumph of Death. I mean, there are, like, just see Bruegel in general, and then we'll find that there are lots of happenings in his work. Now, what happens, that keeps us engaged into the entire frame. So we keep on watching them. We take a lot of time to decode them fully, but there's also another chance that you might feel that the frame is too busy and I do not have so much of time to spend on a painting. But then, there, the other elements should be also, playing a very active role in um, making the viewers engaged in the picture. That's very important. And that way you look at them. Now, see that there's another factor. As I said, that, Bruegel's compositions are very busy. I mean, you see hundreds and, 500 people in a picture frame, and they all are in action. They do multiple activities together. Similarly, you see artists who uh, like work with minimalism. Uh, you just see that there are minimal treatment, minimal images present there, but that doesn't mean that you won't spend much time looking at them. Right? This is the viewer's way of, looking at static images. As you know that you're not in a hurry, unlike, when you go and buy a ticket in a movie hall, you spend 2 hours or 2.5 hours watching them. Unlike uh, watching a movie, you have the painting there for you. You may see them whenever you feel like, uh, or see the images of that. So, in fact, the viewers' scopes are very different for different mediums. Now, what we understand about tempo is actually very different from our regular understanding of tempo. That's more like, when you play an instrument, right? You play a string instrument, for example, or maybe like you use, think about piano or guitar or sitar or anything. What happens, like, maybe you know the notes, but you cannot leave much space in between. You need to be in the right speed. It's not just, you put the sapa and other things in a good sequence, and that will produce a good rhythmic music. It's not necessary. Now, what happens? You need to maintain the time there. Similarly, in art, when you are applying the strokes, if you do not have the flow uh, as an artist, then that will be reflective. You cannot hide that. And that's perhaps one reason that when you see the artworks of the Zen painters, even before that, the Chan painters in China, what they did was, like, it's a very interesting process that, most of the time, if you see the artwork called, it's by Mushi, or six persimmons, or similar kind of, bamboo paintings, and like, I'm not taking too many names to confuse you, but it's more like, those Chan painters who believed in uh, like Taoism, and all those kind of literary painters who lived a life of recluses. what they did, they used to put their mind together. You gather all your concentration, you spend hours, and then when you paint, you go there with a completely free mind. And it's only, what you have practiced and how you developed your ability that you put on paper. So what they did, they painted very fast, and there are just a few strokes that you see. But that stroke, it's not possible to paint something like that without any preparation. And that preparation might be um taking a very long time. See, I'll just tell you one very interesting anecdote on Picasso's life. Like, Picasso was having his retrospective show at the age of 70. And there had been a buyer who saw one of this Picasso's line drawing, which was like a very quick drawing, of course. So she asked a question that, sir, uh, how much do you think you took to paint this? Uh, what was the answer from Picasso? He said that 70 years. Now, that 70 years of experience, of learning, of formula experience, learning, and the mental state, um, the restraint, and everything that is reflective in that line drawing. So what we talk about, like when you see Picasso's drawing, you know that there may be just a few lines, but all those lines are very precious. They're very valuable because these are the outcome of a practice of a lifetime. And not everybody can achieve it in a lifetime. So that is something that will be revealed. I mean, if you do not have a flow in your work, your artwork will look very stiff, and anybody can make out. Like those who have a little bit of understanding, they will be able to, tell then that, this person is not in a flow. So all these factors are important for for a successful creation of a good visual. Um, that much, I would um, like to answer. Now it's up to you, when you watch things. Maybe I'll give another example before I stop with this question and move to the other topics. This is see David Hockney's Splash. There are paintings like Splash, the bigger Splash, and what he commented on the painting. He said that this is just a momentary happening, a splash in a swimming pool that just happens for a fraction of a second, but it took him days and to represented that on the canvas. Now this is something where he wrote that he did it very slowly. He wanted to be very slow, and he was completely relaxed when he was painting. But the subject matter, the theme of the painting was something that is momentary. So that's the fun of static medium. You represent a different kind of time in multiple different ways. I mean, the possibilities are like endless. So is there another question? I'll just check. Okay, so Nitin, if you are there, so would you like to ask anything else, or are you happy with the answer? So Murli, anybody else? Because I don't see any questions here.
Yes, ma'am. 9 students are there, but they are not posting their queries. Let's wait for a few minutes, ma'am.
I'll just wait for some
Right,
time.
ma'am. Right.
Okay, so there's one question where Deepa is asking, just wanted the difference between surrealism and abstract painting. Now, first, let's answer the question together. Uh, it's your, like, what is your understanding of abstraction? Abstract paintings are non-representational. So realism and abstraction, they have, like, they're very different representational styles in art. Um, of course, like, idealism has got something to do with abstraction, that you simplify it or complicate it, make it very complex uh, at the level of abstraction. Right? When the abstract paintings doesn't have any uh, quality that would determine its affinity or resemblance with the natural form that you already know, or they're, like, very close to the natural forms that we have seen, but it doesn't have much of a representational clue. No, that's all about how we look at abstract art. Now, surrealism is not abstract. It has to be uh, having some kind of a naturalistic and realistic look, that all the images that you see there should be recognizable. Fine. So they are all representational and recognized forms in surrealism. uh, but the interesting thing is that in surrealism we create a visual paradox which is very dreamlike, that it's also connected to utopia. What is that there are also reality, um, that is visual reality. We see it and we feel that it's all real, what is happening in front of us. But interestingly, what happens that we also see that it's real to look at, but our rational mind, um, it talks against it. It says that it's not possible. Fine. For example, if we suddenly make a picture where we make a room, an interior, um, or maybe it's just a classroom. Some students are sitting and one teacher is lecturing, and then you suddenly show a train is passing by. Its train is moving in between them. Now it's possible to paint a picture like that. It can be a train, or maybe an elephant there, right? So you can very well paint that picture, but the rationality will be, the rationality within you will ask the question that how could it enter the classroom? How big the doors are? Um, I mean, is it a tiny train, or is it a tiny miniature elephant, or what is it, right? But it's possible in painting. You can paint them, but it's like dream, right? There are juxtaposition of images which are otherwise, it doesn't, it goes beyond your understanding. It goes beyond the reality that we know and that we are familiar of. So when we look at something like that, in fact, when we talked about creating visual paradox, I showed Magritte in this course. Like, you must be familiar with all those word artworks, that when you look at a room with a giant comb in that, or a giant paintbrush with a tiny bed and a tiny almirah, you might question the scale, the size of these things, that they're all known objects, but the kind of interrelationship between the sizes are not very natural. They're not natural at all. But then you then question that like, what is it now? Then, as we said, it's a visual paradox. So you just try to disorient you a little bit or reorient you in a different order. And then if you think that that comb is like, the kind of regular comb that we have for human use, or the makeup brush is also like that, but they're just placed in a doll's house, then it justifies you, right? So surrealism is all about playing with unnatural scales, imaginary space, but it's not abstract. They're very real. They're real looking. See Salvador Dali, Magritte, um, they're all very real looking. But then the space that they're creating are often very ideal, utopian. So that has got some, like if you say that that's an idealism, the idealism takes it close to abstraction. Idea-wise, they're very different, but if we say that the way they're idealized, uh, there's a relationship with the idea of abstraction, that you simplify images. So it has got nothing to do with how recognizable the forms are, but in abstraction. But for surrealism, yes, I mean, you should be able to read them and get confused, and then again decode the images to your understanding. And as you know, surrealism was established in response to the irrational post-war social context. So that there are deeper notions to it. And also, like, the theory of dream, human mind, the other psychological aspects, like the subconscious mind of Freud, they are all, they will come into the context. Right? So I hope you understood it. I'll just take the other questions now. Okay, it's about the question patterns. Pattern of question paper 2, does it has negative marks? Are we discussing the marking patterns and all here?
Yes, ma'am, we can tell them, ma'am. Not in detail, just overall summary kind of thing you can give, ma'am.
Fine. So those are the things that are mentioned actually, like, these are specific question for a specific uh, thing. So there are minus marking somewhere, some quizzes there's no minus marking at all. So it's like that. So what is the main difference in naturalism and imagination? The work related to classical period is related with which of them? Classical art you're talking about? Okay. So that's the difference between naturalism and imagination. See, what we see in nature is often imperfect, right? Imperfect in our notion. It's like we feel that, there are lots of deformities in nature. Not everybody is having the ideal body proportion, or the ideal eyes or nose or facial features, the ideal, even like if you take example of a tree or any other natural objects for that matter, which are made in nature, they're not man-made forms. You see that nobody is perfect. Now, what is our sense of perfection? If we feel that everything that we understand about perfection is connected to our understanding of classical art. So classical art has certain bit of idealism into it, that they try to take the average proportion and they try to idealize it. So it's more like, everybody, like if you take example of maybe like see the classical Greek art, for that matter, in that particular phase of classical Greek art, you've seen that they have a fixed proportion for every figures. In fact, much later, like if you read about the impressionists of 19th century, the modern painters, they were the pioneers of bringing the modernity. Uh, People like Pissarro and Renoir, they were taking an art course, and they had the teacher who believed in classical ideology. And then in their class, they were not allowed to look uh, beyond the windows and look at nature, because what he said, that you only study the models who are mostly athletes, or they're very well built with all bicep and everything. So just look at them and study them, or you go to the museum, see the antiquities and follow the models. Because when you look at nature, nature is full of imperfect things. There are distorted trees and animals of different proportions, and it's full of imperfection. So don't do that. You only follow what is ideal. Now, so you can understand, this is more like a personal choice of thing that comes from a um, principle, like it's your ideology uh, that would determine like what whether you need to take up naturalism for your artwork, or you will idealize them and make them. So classical art, of course, like it took a lot of time for the artists to reach that perfection, which is like known, that's standardized as perfection. That was again revived in Renaissance during late 15th and 16th century. Also, it continued in 17th century Baroque, Rococo. So all those things were there, but there had been also the medieval and dark age, when we valued other things like the decorative qualities, or many other things. And then romanticism, 19th century romanticism, impressionism, post-impressionism, expressionism, uh, they are like, where we see the triumph of naturalism. Like we wanted to capture the natural light, natural shade, imperfection, like, a person who is not beautiful in that standard. Even like, the abstract painting by when Picasso painted Demoiselle d'Avignon, like he was inspired by the African sculpture, like the African tribal sculpture, where beauty had a different definition, and that has got nothing to do with the Greek classical model. You see, in 1905, when Matisse had his first show, the Fauvists who came into the scene, um, they all thought of abstraction and naturalism from a very different light, which is like, very significant for for the art movement, the movement of art. So that was the answer. I think you're happy. You wanted to know that. I hope so. So again, like the next question, I would see what type of questions we will get. I think it's subjective. So what would be the word limit? No, it's mostly objective questions. They're all MCQs, multiple choice questions. And also in the multiple choice questions, there are some questions which are like, very concept based. So you will have to just take mark. Um, and can you explain about the crystallographic balance? Okay, crystallographic balance is related to all over pattern. So when we say that, that there's a balance between, I mean, I'll give you one example, like maybe a printed textile. It has a pattern which is all over. So there's not a fixed focus anywhere. So you do not focus on a particular thing, like as we said, that this is a focal point, there are multiple accents and all. So that's not there. So it's like an all over pattern. It's also important because, when there's no focus or like, the primary focus, secondary focus, and all those things present, then the entire thing start working as a focal point. So the entire visual becomes the focal interest. Like, for example, like as I give you example of the printed textile, when you wear a print in your dress, you may not like, it can be a check or a block print or anything, a repetitive pattern. You may not want a particular part to be emphasized there. You want the evenness. But that doesn't mean that it doesn't have balance. Right. So even overall pattern. Then I'll also take example of Andy Warhol's 100 soup cans. I'm just giving examples that I used in the course so that it becomes easier for you to see it once again and understand it. That's also like, you can take all these examples and assess like, how crystallographic balance works. Now that is the question, and then it's great if you throw some light on crystallographic balance and symmetrical balance. Okay. So symmetrical balance is like, symmetry is one factor that makes thing look balanced by default. It's automatically balanced when there's symmetry. And symmetry means you just, cut the image from the center and you see that there's a mirror image. So it's more like, it's like a, when you see that, it's like a sea and a reverse sea from both sides, fine? And they're like all similar. So it looks balanced. And that also give it some kind of a very, very iconic look. So when things are in symmetry, like when we try to show some, iconic image, like a god or the image of God or superhuman beings or something, even it can be like a symmetrical object like a Coca-Cola bottle, right? It's very iconic. So their symmetry plays a very important role. And then challenges when we see asymmetry, when symmetry is not present, and balance is like a mandatory demand. So symmetrical balance, like they're connected to expressions which are religious, which are iconic. I discussed that actually in, I think, with lots of examples. So, and then, okay. So, okay. Rohit Sharma is like, talked about imagination. Okay, I think it's an extension of his previous questions. Is it, Rohit? If I get it wrong, what is the main difference in naturalism and imagination? Now, imagination is something like, that involves a lot of things. What we see in nature can also be imagined, but it's not a direct representation of the natural forms, right? Your question was like, what was the relationship between naturalism and imagination? Now, what is there, like, we can only represent it. We do not have much scope to imagine there. Like, you may imagine a unusually tall tree or a dwarfish monument or anything. I mean, yeah, that's like, human mind has enormous possibility of visualization. So that's something like, when you see, see something that doesn't have any natural resemblance, but it still has balance. It has other visual qualities that we look for. Imagination gets a place in visual art. It can also be like, the imagination in the theme, how you place different objects in a given space in your own way. So even like when we were talking about surrealism, it's all about imagination. You just imagine it there. It's like, it's a mind space, it's a mindscape. It's like, a happening which is going on inside your mind, and that's it. Now, okay. So Rohit is happy with the answer. Thank you. Um, no more questions. So just let me know if you have more queries. Maybe like, I'll just add here as you questions like um, relationship between symmetrical balance and crystallographic balance. Now, crystallographic balance is also, it has got symmetry in it because it's like all over. Uh, it may or may not be symmetrical because, if you divide it into two halves, you do not get a mirror image there. So crystallographic balance often is more like the fractals. I mean, it doesn't have a beginning of or an end. It can be added and continued. So crystallographic balance is emphasized on continuity, which you do not see in symmetrical balance. Symmetrical balance will end somewhere. It's like, two brackets. It's a confined space that we create in symmetry. So I'll again move to the other questions. Okay, so what would we say when we are creating any artwork with our yeah, so it's more like, what we hold in our memory. That's like, Rohit, I would refer you a very interesting chapter if you come across that, if you get your hand on a book. That's Gombrich's Art and Illusions, third chapter. I'll just give you some examples to make the query maybe like interesting for you. But if you get a scope, please read that. The book is available, Art and Illusion by Gombrich. So that is like a direct answer to your question. So what would we say when we are creating any artwork with our memory? Now, human memory is something like, that can be worked upon. Like, you have seen something, you are more observant than somebody else. So you have seen some kind of a animal. Say, for example, you have um, yeah, it got disconnected, sorry. So for example, you've seen a giraffe. Now you remembered it partially. um, some other person might have seen the same giraffe and remembered it a little more. Now you are carrying your visual references as a memory, and you are trying to represent it. Maybe you remember everything, but you do not have the right skill to represent them. So all those factors are, they work as relative factors there. Now, we have lots of things that we hold in our memory, and then we represent them. For example, if you think of two different approaches to a drawing. One is perhaps, when we try to explain something through a diagram that has a natural reference. And the other one where you have something in your mind uh, that you do a mental visualization and you try to put it um, physically. So you make an intangible thing tangible. And also there are like relationship between tacit and explicit. Also, there are relationship between formula and experience. So there are many things that we carry in our memory. So we draw from our memory, and they're often very effective. And most of the time, like when we feel that there's a dilemma whether we should take reference or not. Now, if you're taking reference from nature, it's your own reference. But like like we do not copy somebody's poem, right? You write it on your own. Similarly, like when you create an image, um, you may take reference from different sources, but it should be your original. So memory gives you that thing, and you may also improvise your memory by painting, observing, doing drawings and sketches frequently. That's very important. Um, so yeah, that was the question, and no more questions I can see. So Rohit, is it fine? Rohita Sharma. Sorry, I have been constantly, reading it wrong. Okay, most welcome, Rohita, for asking questions and cleared your queries. Yeah, I mean, but that was my mistake to read your name wrongly. I mean, it should not happen. Yeah, it's okay. Fine. Yes, if you do not have any more questions or queries, we may end the session, but then, the forum is there. So if you have more questions later, you may always be there. There won't be any live sessions anymore, but you may always pose your questions to me. Okay, there's one question. I'll read it. Okay, so Nitin Radhakrishnan is asking a very interesting question. Murali, I would like to take the question. Fine. So what Nathan is asking, that do you know of artists who have invested themselves in creating an expression that puts the viewers in a spiritual or meditative state of mind? The abstract expressionists it's like, I would refer the American abstract expressionism movement, and mainly artists like Jackson Pollock or Mark Rothko. In fact, when you look at paintings of Rothko, I think many of you are familiar with the paintings. If not, please see Jackson Pollock and Rothko. At least there are many other abstract expressionists, but like people, Rothko has actually, like, it's directly connected to your question. I think so. He wanted to create that kind of a meditative quality. So all the images, they are like all pure forms and shapes that had another visual reference from Kandinsky, that, in his book, he said that, a line is not just a contour to delineate a shape, or a surface which is colored. It's not just, the color is just not there to reveal a surface. It has got more to do. There are independent elements. So you may just draw a line, or maybe a texture for the sake of it. So line for the sake of a line, texture for a sake of a texture, color for the sake of that color. All these things are possible. That takes it to a different level. So you do not think of content which is like, which is related to the usual current affairs or past or any other references as such, and they become extremely meditative. Like when you see the artworks of Mark Rothko, you see, it's like all about how he's placing one color beside another color, how he's creating the space. I mean, as you know, like you're using a warm color, which is very high value, it will come close to you, whereas the color with less value would go deeper into the space. So how he has placed them to create a two-dimensional space where, all the colors, whether regardless of whether they're warm or cool, or high value or low value, they're just coming to a same surface, and that is also creating some kind of a very unpenetrating and often very bleak, at the same time extremely meditative space in front of your eyes. And if you visit Rothko Museum, you would see that there are people sitting there for hours watching those paintings. Why is it happening? It has a rhythm which is much deeper than, any tangible movements or actions that we experience in real life. So it takes you to a different level, and it becomes extremely meditative. And meditation, as you know, it's like a unperturbed consciousness that we talk about. So you may look at them, experience them from a very different perspective, with no reference to nature, or anything, any materialism that is connected to our daily life. It's a response to that. So it's part of this abstract expressionism. The name says it all. So so Rohita is right. So Nitin, is it fine? I think you're familiar with Rothko's work. I mean, I could only think of Rothko when I got your question. And Rohita, you're writing, your lectures were really very impressive, and your pedagogy also. I hope that's, I'm really very, very thankful to you if you like the course. I mean, that's the success of everything. So any other sessions of advanced lecture in the same series, I will attend that surely. Thank you. I'll let you know, of course, like you'll get to know. I do not have a plan in the next year. I'm slightly preoccupied, but I mean, I need to design another course. Of course, like this course I designed with a thought that if somebody wants to get familiar with the language of visual communication and art, I should just give them kind of a hand holding. So that is all about, like I was thinking, what should be the takeaway of the course? What will you learn from it? I mean, my aim was to make it as simplified to you as possible. So maybe I may think of a full-fledged. There are also courses on art appreciation. After this course, if you take up art appreciation course in the advanced level by any other faculty, or there are lots of courses available. It'll be, I think, it'll be easier for you to catch advanced level art appreciation from this learning. So thank you. I'll wait for a few, maybe a couple of minutes more. And if I get a question, it's fine, or I'll end the session. Okay. So no more questions on the chat box that I can see. Okay, Nathan. I've seen Rothko's paintings before, ma'am. Don't you feel like the saturation levels used were way beyond mild and soft? So it wasn't exactly calming. It seemed quite hard hitting and crude for me. You are right. See, Rothko didn't want to give a calming effect. And when we call it meditative, it's not just, we talk about it in a very religious term. So it takes you into a state of mind that may or may not be calming. It can be extremely turbulent when you see the tension between his use of colors. You've seen the way he used red and orange and black. It's like, it just vibrates. It just comes towards you. It's not that more than, there's a constant push and pull that happens in an overall surface. And there are lots of subtlety and, they're very subtle, very fine, and that puts you into a state of mind, right? So by saying that it's meditative, I didn't mean that it has to be necessarily calming, but whatever it is, it's very, very engaging. They're nothing but, if a layman looks at it, uh, they cannot ignore by calling it nothing but, because there's nothing, like there's no resembling, the resemblance with the shape that you have a natural reference with. They're like patches. You may feel that they're like, how you paint very casually, but you cannot undermine um, the emotions, and it's very difficult to be ignorant of that. And then you are asking for examples from Eastern art. I think Eastern art or Oriental art is full of that. In Western art, I think still there are fewer examples. Um, and Eastern or maybe the Oriental art is full of that. If you go from Chinese painting to Japanese, traditional art, even the backdrops of no play, uh, to Indian art in Bengal school, Bombay school, even before that, those which are part of the nationalistic movement. If you see them, which are not directly influenced by European Renaissance, you feel that the quality had been the same. To think of the folk art tradition um, and elsewhere, it's full of that quality that you just look at them and you see that there are repetitive patterns, which doesn't have a particular focal point, or maybe like, the images are also not very naturalistic. They're highly abstract and spiritual. Think of the landscapes by Nishan, Mushi, Tumchi Chang. Um, um, Names are like many, and also like today only in the morning I was just going through a few sketches of Nandalal Bose that he painted on postcards that he gave to many of the students. So there's a collection of that. Vinod Bihari Mukherjee, for that matter. All these things, of course, like they're all like you cannot do without the natural references, and they didn't want to. Of course, all these colors, all this space division, and the juxtaposition of different images, they're all inspired by nature. But it's like, taking it into a different realm where the reality is becoming more and more meaningful in its abstract, I mean, the kind of simplification that is happening, the kind of abstraction that we are incorporating. In fact, when you see the different kinds of like, are you familiar with Riten Mojumdar's textile work? Please see Riten Mojumdar. He's not very widely viewed kind of a artist. He was a textile designer and he did lots of works. Of course, like, I mean, if we take example of Raza, Souza, and even like, the Raza's canvases, like, his understanding of abstract forms. And also like Riten Mojumdar, I would ask you to, see, like, you would enjoy it. You might find them in Google. You're familiar with Raza, the way he used dots and other geometrical patterns? Riten Mojumdar, Riten. I'll write it down here. Right? The reference of. He was the one who was involved, like, he was associated with the making of Fab India. He worked for the designs of Fab India in the early years. Worked extensively with calligraphy. So I think we are, yeah. So Murli, do you think we should end the session now?
Yes, ma'am. We can end, ma'am. Students are not posting the questions.
Yeah.
We can
And
end,
the
ma'am.
time is also over.
Yeah. Yes, ma'am.
So thank you, everybody. And I'm there. So if you have more queries, you may always write to me. Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye. Thank you.
Okay, ma'am. I'm stopping the broadcast, ma'am.
Okay.
Thank you very much for your valuable time, ma'am. Bye, ma'am.
Bye-bye.
Yes, bye, ma'am.
Thanks, Murli.
Yes,
Thanks a
bye.
lot, Murli.
Sure, ma'am. Bye, ma'am.